I first started with learning how to engineer. So that's just basically sequencing, putting tracks together, putting vocals together. And then eventually that graduated and said, hey, well, in order for me to like learn how to engineer, I need a rapper. I need someone who can, a vocalist. And I became the vocalist, and I became the producer. So I was basically this one man band, essentially just diving into every aspect of music.
Hello, Joey. How are you today?
I'm doing much better than usual for some weird reason. I think I'm just happy to be here.
That's the way to start. Okay, so we're happy today because we have Shawn Mims with us. Shawn, it's great to see you. Great to meet you.
Pleasure's all mine. Thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate it. And I heard I'm the first guest for, I don't know if this is a different season, but I'm happy to be first at anything in life, I guess.
Yeah, you're definitely the first. We're setting, making a historic moment right now. So we're glad to have you. What we were just talking about before we came on was that how we all spend our time in different states and such. And I'm in Florida, Joey's in New York, and you were saying that you're in Florida and New York, as I have a place up in New York as well. So tell us a little bit about that. What's your connection to Florida, to New York? Like, how'd you all that stuff?
Ironically, I was born and raised in New York. I was born and raised in Manhattan, in the Washington Heights area. So there you go. Most of my childhood was spent in Washington Heights. I think I moved to Long Island around the age of 16 years old. So I spent some time on the island. And then from the island, I think I spent about 5 years there. I went to Brooklyn, from Brooklyn to Queens, then back to Long Island. My career took off. Then I went back to Long Island and then eventually moved to Jersey. So I'm one of those people that could, and now I obviously still have a place in Manhattan, but I could legitimately say I've probably like as New York as it gets. But my grandparents, however, moved to Boynton Beach. They retired in the early 90s to Boynton Beach. And during the pandemic, I was torn between buying a property in New Jersey or buying something in Florida. And I just said to myself, you know what? Grandparents have been around me my whole life. It's time for me to kind of give back and move as close as I can to them. So I'm not in the Boynton Beach area, but I'm not too far away from it. So I get to spend a good amount of time with them in their older years.
Yeah, you're real close with them? You've always been close? Always.
My grandmother is actually my legal guardian. So my story, if you guys don't know, for anyone watching, is by the age of 13, I survived the death of both my mother and father. So my father passed away when I was 11, and my mother passed away when I was 13. So my grandmother became my legal guardian. So she's kind of like a grandmother / mother to me as well. Got it. Awesome. And do you have any siblings or anything like that? Older brother, who's still in New Jersey, New York area, and a younger sister who I'm so proud of her because she just graduated from dental school. So she's now a full-blown dentist, operating and working in the New York City area. Awesome. That's cool. That's cool. So tell us about, I mean, look, lots of people say they want to be musicians. They want to be, rock stars, all these different things. But you actually did it. So maybe tell us a little bit about like the logistics, maybe. Okay, cool. Like, how do you do this, and this? But more like, I'm particularly interested in how did you just make the mental commitment that was what you were going to do, and then did you just kept doing it all along? Tell us about it. Yeah, I think like anything in life, you start off with just pure fun and joy, right? That's the goal. Like whenever you go into something, there has to be a certain amount of joy and fun in it. And when I was younger, right after the passing of my mother, the last gift she actually got me was a turntable set. And I think for me at the time, I didn't realize how important of a gift that was, because I just dived into just listening to music, like trying to become a DJ. My music equipment was not great at all, but I think someone told me something then that sticks with me to this day. They said, hey, and obviously your mother's not going to buy a 13-year-old the most expensive equipment, but the person who was trying to teach me about the equipment once she passed away said, hey, if you can master being a DJ on this equipment, imagine what you can do when you have the real equipment. And that stuck with me. And I remember just diving into music as a young 13-year-old who just went through this traumatic experience. And that kind of curtailed my life into wanting to learn about how music was created, how it was produced, how it was engineered, recorded. So I first started with learning how to engineer. So that's just basically sequencing, putting tracks together, putting vocals together. And then eventually that graduated into, hey, well, in order for me to like learn how to engineer, I need a rapper. I need someone who can, a vocalist. And I became the vocalist, and I became the producer. So I was basically this one-man band, essentially, just diving into every aspect of music. And it was all just in fun until, and I'll say this is a crazy story, until I was about, I want to say 18, 19 years old. A person by the name of Kevin Woodley, Kevin Sugar Daddy Woodley, that was his name. He used to be a DJ at the Shadow Club in New York. He was also on the radio station WBLS. He said, hey, man, you ever thought about taking it seriously about the rapping? And I was like, yeah, I mean, you know, if something can come from it, fine. He said, well, you should fall back from being an engineer, fall back from being a producer, and let me focus on that part, and you just focus on being a rapper. And
Wait,
I remember
I pause for a second just to clarify and make sure I understood that. So at that point, you were focused more on the engineering and the technical side of everything, and the rap was really just kind of like something you did to work on the technical side, and it wasn't really something you necessarily were pursuing.
Never.
Yes.
Even till this day, I tell people my initial entry into music was I looked at people from a mogul standpoint, and I wanted to be the person that kind of helped cultivate the talent, cultivate the music, be in the studio, make the music sound better, put it out. So I was always business oriented at that time. But up until, you know, Woodley told me, hey, you should focus on being an artist. So yes, it was never in my destiny. It was in my destiny to be an artist, but it wasn't in my, I couldn't foreshadow it at the time.
Right.
That, yeah, that, you know, I always tell people too. So I went from the age of like 18, 19 to about 24. I consider that my starving artist period. So that's when you don't have direction. Especially if you're creative, you don't have direction on life. You don't know what you want to do. I was a straight A student. I could have probably gotten a scholarship to any university I wanted to go to. At the time, living in Long Island, I think Hofstra was the university that I was eyeballing. And then that summer, right before I had to make a commitment to a school, I just kind of fell in love with the hustle of music. And I remember going through that summer saying, you know what, I don't want to do Hofstra because that's going to take away too much of my time. So I'm going to attend Nassau Community College, still pursue somewhat of an education, and then see where the music goes. And the music just took me for 4 years, 4 or 5 years later, as a starving artist, rubbing pennies together to try to like just keep my talent alive. Back to your question, I remember sitting with my sister, and I have obviously different fathers. And I remember living in Jamaica, Queens at the time, sitting with him, and he looked at me and said, hey, you know, you're a very smart person. How much time are you going to give this how much time and energy are you going to give this before you decide that you have to kind of go back into getting your education? I think I was around 23 at the time. And I had thrown everything at music, and it just wasn't reciprocating the love. And I said to myself, you know what? In my mind, I said, you know what? I don't have a time frame, but I got to go hard. And I remember not relocating, but I came down to Florida for about a good 2 to 3 months. And I started pushing a record down here. And the entry for barrier was much easier than doing it in New York. And my career kind of catapulted after that. So I think the combination of the conversation that kind of lit the fire under me, and then also just getting out of my comfort zone and coming to somewhere foreign, it just made things kind of escalate as well.
So what was that kind of, I mean, at the time that this happened, this wasn't the terminology, but I'll use today's terminology. What was the kind of like viral moment or the viral spark that kind of like, that you remember as like the launching point where you really felt like you got traction?
I think it was a culmination of things. So like I would say there was one week in particular, I want to say like circa May 2006, where I was traveling with my business partner at the time, and we were going from the Miami area all the way up into Tampa. So our first stop was West Palm Beach radio station. Second stop was Fort Myers. Third stop was Tampa. And when I was leaving out of West Palm, one of the DJs who actually was the producer of the record played the record on radio. So I heard it as I was leaving out of West Palm into Fort Myers. We stopped at the Fort Myers radio station, and they embraced the record. And then when we went to Tampa, the ultimate like badge of honor for me was a woman by the name of Beata, who was the music director at the time. I was trying to push another record to her to get into rotation. And she was brutally honest with me. She said, hey, this record is not going to work on our station. And I remember having the record, This Is Why I'm Hot, in my back pocket. It was a CD at the time. And I said, hey, I did bring another record that maybe you could play for your DJs and your jocks and see if they like it. And she played the record, and she bopped her head and she said, you know what? This is something that may work in my market. And I think we left the meeting, and by the time we left the meeting, she called my business partner and said, hey, turn the radio on. Turn the radio on, and they're playing my song. 2 days later, said the reaction to the song was so great that they're going to put it into rotation. And I think that was what solidified me with that station, that I can go take that conversation back to other stations and say, hey, show me some love. So yeah, that it's funny how I can remember that, because I don't remember a lot of stuff, but that obviously I every day I wake up and I thank Beata and that conversation and everyone involved, honestly.
It's a big turning point, because then This Is Why I'm Hot hit #1 on the US Billboard. In 2007. 2007. Yep. Okay.
Yeah. So so we were independent in 2006. I did a partnership deal with a company by the name of UBO, and here's how it worked. And they believed in me, so I give them the credit. They were willing to cut me a check for $150,000. However, they didn't give me the check. They just said, hey, before we commit to this money, you got to show us something. And the record had already gotten some love in Florida markets. We were kind of closing in on the state of Florida. So they infused the money into helping me kind of move around the country to get other stations involved. And I think by September or October, so we're going from May was the initial release of the record on certain stations. So May, June, July, August, September comes around, and that's when the record labels start to call. And that's when the interest started to peak, where I was getting a multitude of offers from different record labels. And I remember the record started to kind of it was going up the charts. I think we got it to like 40 on the rhythmic chart, or somewhere in that top 40 range on the rhythmic chart. And then it started to kind of plateau because we weren't able to get the rest of the country involved. And I remember a few of the people in the promotions department at Capitol Records were like, hey, we love this record. We love the artist. In good grace, we're going to start working the record because we really want to sign you guys over here. And they, I love them till this day. Shout out to Paula Tuggy. Shout out to everybody in the promotions department. They were an integral part in getting the record to continuously, gradually climb. And then by 2007, boom.
That's awesome. And because I'm not as familiar with the business of music as other businesses I'm familiar with, but just to clarify what you're saying, when you say help get the rest of the country involved and what they helped you do, that's all airplay. That's what you're referring to as like additional stations playing it on the rotation, and like that was essentially the name of the game. That was distribution essentially that you needed to really scale. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So if you guys ever look at like Billboard Hot 100, which is probably like the best chart to look at when it comes to radio airplay, in order for a record to get to the top of Billboard Hot 100, every radio station in the country has to kind of be all in on that record into power rotation, which means that you normally are getting like, 40 to 50 spins a day in certain markets at radio with your record. the thing about having a record take off in a certain market in May of 2006 is that by the time December 2006 rolls around, that market has already burnt the record out. So you really, it takes a lot of convincing stations that there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes, and I don't want to make reference to payola or anything like that, but I mean, meaning if you want to learn the business of radio, what we try to do as artists, we say, hey, look, I know the record, you guys have had it in power rotation. I want to come to the market and do a show for the people. And that way, maybe it'll just kind of keep the record alive a little bit longer. So I'll go to certain markets and I'll perform at certain clubs or festivals just so that the record maintains that relevance in that market, and the radio stations are happy, the artists are happy, the record labels are happy, and then I can kind of continue just to get to that #1 spot.
Yeah. How do you execute or how do you plan the strategy for that? Meaning, like you just said, like, hey, in this market, it kind of makes me think of like politics and the way that they kind of like plan certain areas that they're going to do like more advertising or less, depending on what they're trying to accomplish. It sounds to me like there should be like a national plan of, and you guys are taking in metrics in terms of, how many plays you're getting, and like, oh, we're actually falling short over here, so let's send you out for, like you said, a live event at a club. I mean, is it that well thought out and planned if it's done perfectly?
Dan, I'm gonna have you call a record label and sign up for a job in promotions, because that's exactly, it's politics, right? It's basically, hey, look, for example, New York is the #1 radio market in the country. I think LA, it goes basically based on how many people are living in the market. So like, let's say New York is the #1 market in the country for people living there, or LA. I know it pity pats between the two areas. You want to lock down the bigger states first, right? So you know that you're getting the airplay is actually reaching people, and then you work on what we call secondary markets, right? So primary markets would be New York, LA, Miami, Dallas, Houston, Chicago, San Francisco. So these markets are like the big major markets. When you get airplay in these markets, you've done really great for yourself. And then you don't want to forget the secondary markets like the West Palms, Fort Myers, because once again, my theory was if I can get these markets to kind of follow suit, it's easy for me to have a conversation with Miami with regard to playing the record, because they kind of see the surrounding area crumbling in. So it's like running for president. It 100% is like running for president.
Yeah. How does it work now? Is it still so radio focused as far as what drives the business, or is it more social media, YouTube? Like it seems like you could build a whole career just off of YouTube. I mean, just based on the people that I like.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what I tell people is every 10 years, technology comes and disrupts the music industry, right? So radio is really more prominent in the early, I mean, everywhere for like, I guess up until like the early 2000s, right? So now streaming, so the DSPs like Spotify, Apple Music are more influenced by social media than they are by radio. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't be on radio, because if you want to have the #1 record in the country, you still need radio to make that happen. It just means that more artists are surviving without traditional airplay than there are from the past. So for example, an artist like, I'll use Justin Bieber as a great example. Justin caved, he was able to become a viral sensation on using YouTube, and that's how he kind of got his claim to fame with doing cover songs on YouTube. Eventually, he became a household name, and then the radio station started to pick his music up, and now he's probably one of the biggest pop artists in for our generation.
That's right. Interesting. Cool. So as you were going through this entire process, or like, or now let's not even talk about the past. Let's talk about kind of like where you're at now. Let's say over the last 10 years or so, because 2006 to me doesn't sound that long ago, but if I do the math, it's like, I think you and I are
a few years ago. Oh my God.
About the same age. So
I think the pandemic did something to us. I don't know if because even when you talk about the pandemic, right, 2020, it seems like it was like yesterday, and it was almost it was 5 years ago at this point. or over 5 years.
The 90s was only 10 years ago to me.
There you, Joey, there you go. Exactly that's how I feel. Every day I get reminded of how long ago my record was out. When I see somebody and said, "Hey, I used to rock to you in elementary school," and I'm like, "Wow," So yeah, as close as it seems, we are probably 2 decades. I'm going on 2 decades, and next year will be the 20th anniversary of the record release, and 2027 will be the 20-year anniversary of the album release. So it's been a long journey that has gone by very fast. Today's world is not the same as yesterday's world, and I say that meaning me. I even had to learn how to pivot as a person, not even as an artist. So much so that in 2011, I was already my ideology was like getting out of music and going into different careers. And one of the careers I chose to kind of look into was bootstrapping a startup, and going into the whole VC space.
Shawn,
so,
will you talk a little bit about why you transitioned? What was your thought process and your spirit process around transitioning?
I think a few things, right? So for me, it was, I always have this sense of trying to prove to myself that I can conquer different spaces, right? So when you're a musician, especially when you're a musician that has topped the charts, it's very hard. Or at least for me, not for all musicians, but just for me, it was very hard to duplicate that. And when you start to get around people and they know, okay, they call it the sophomore jinx, in essence, where if you don't duplicate what you did the first time around, they consider things unsuccessful. And I made a great amount of money doing music. I still do. I still tour, and I love it. But I just felt like if you're only as good as your best venture in life, right? So if you're running a startup and you created Google, at some point you love it, but you want to move on and do something bigger and better. And for me, I think it was more about my upbringing, the ability for people to say you can't do things so many times in my life that I got tired of hearing it. And I'll tell you my turn point. I was on a plane to San Francisco. I had a show, I want to say either in San Fran or like somewhere close to Silicon Valley. And my business partner was on the phone with me, Eric Mendelson, who's still my business partner to this day. And I told him my idea for an app I wanted to build. Had no knowledge of the space at all. He made a few calls to a couple of VCs, and they allowed none of them picked up the phone. No one cared. Even as the #1 artist at one point in my life, no one even cared to have a meeting with me except one person. And I remember going into that meeting and them saying, "Hey, your idea is great, but what are you doing here? Like, we can't do anything with an idea." And even then, I was like, "Okay, well, I don't know how to code or build an app or do anything." And my other business partner, who was also the producer of my record, he kind of is triggered different. He wanted to dive into the process of learning how to do that. So he actually started fake coding an app just so that we could show people the functionality of what my idea was. And he put together something cool, and they took it to a hackathon in Miami, and they ended up winning the hackathon. And I think that was like the fire that lit them to say, "Hey, we can do this. We just need to bootstrap for a little bit, take money out of our own pockets." And we did exactly that. We learned the process by actually hitting our head and paying some coders in a different country that basically dragged us for a long time.
Everybody does that, yeah.
A few $100,000 later, we just started learning the game of raising money. We got some real VCs interested in it, and we launched the product. And even though that product was called Recordgram at the time, we changed it to Creator. Even though the product is no longer viable, I think the process of going through it taught me so much about different spaces that it just made me my ability to pivot even greater with going into anything that I put my mind to. And that's been my attitude since then.
Do you use the word entrepreneur in your mind about yourself? Do you think of yourself as I think of you as an entrepreneur because I use that word a lot for myself and others that I know. What do you think of that word?
So I was closing a deal yesterday, and the deal was getting a little bumpy. I won't say what it was in reference to this call, but I was in the process of helping someone basically make about $2.5 million. And the person on the other end of the deal, the buyer, as I would say, the fund, it got a little shaky with them. So in conversation, I had to remind them. I said, "Hey, listen, and it's the first time, probably the last time I'll say it this way, but I said, hey, I understand you know me as a musician. I get it, but let me just correct you and let you understand I'm an entrepreneur first. I'm an investor and I'm an entrepreneur. So I understand what the game, and I understand that you're not following the correct protocol. We want to close this deal. We want to do right by your firm, but I got to make sure my client is comfortable." And in that conversation, yes, I would say 100%, Dan, I'm an entrepreneur because I was able to pivot and understand how other industries work. So it taught me not just about music, but about the tech space, about the crypto space, about food and beverage. It's all the same when it comes down to it at the end of the day. So.
Right. So this is a question for you and Joey, okay? Because Joey's a working actor for however many years in New York.
Oh God, yeah.
So we can go into that. But been in New York a long time, working. So my question for both of you, being that you've both been in the creative space the entire time, basically, how many other creative artists really think of themselves as entrepreneurs, or think of themselves from like a business perspective, versus kind of, in my experience as a theater producer and someone who's worked a lot with creatives but more on the business side only, I found the people that I interacted with, it was a relatively small percentage that saw the work that they did as a creative as a product to be looked at the same as you would any other product in a business, and then kind of have that entrepreneurial mindset around it. So my question is for you guys, in your experience of other artists and creatives, what do you think that percentage is that really can walk the line between, hey, I'm a creative, I'm an artist, but I'm also aware that there needs to be this business aspect to what I'm doing?
I'll let Joey take the floor first, and then I'll obviously give my 2 cents after.
I think it's a very small, it's a minority, in my opinion. Yeah. I certainly wish they taught that a lot more in any of the training programs. I went to arguably one of the best training programs. We had no business training at all. That would have been quite helpful. It's just not a mindset a lot of the artists I know have. We're not wired to think business-wise. We're just thinking hard and creative.
And in those training programs that you're referring to, not only do they not have it, is there almost an element of like, nah, you don't even need to think about it. It's almost like pushed aside, or is it just ignored?
In my experience, it is, oh, this is something you're going to absolutely have to think about. Anyway, there's just not a lot of guidance in that direction. They absolutely say, no, you have to have your ducks in a row. This is what the industry looks like at the time, whenever you're getting out of the program. So make sure you know what you're doing. Well, we're not going to help you with that. That was my experience. I don't know what it is now.
Yeah.
What about you, Shawn?
I'll try to make a long-winded conversation as short as I can, right?
Oh, please.
I used
be long-winded.
I used to always tell people there's 2 type of people in this world. There's creative and conservative people, right? So creativity is not built on being conservative, right? Creative people have to think outside the box. They have to think that the impossible is possible. Take an Elon Musk for that example. And then you have a conservative person who's basically the complete opposite side of the spectrum, who's, hey, we have to be calculated. We have to understand risk tolerance and things of that nature. So they look at the numbers and they say, hey, a conservative will say, hey, $1 million, let's blow it all on something creative. And a conservative is going to say $1 million, let's give 50,000 for creative and a 950,000 for just making sure that the business is done correctly. I started off as both in life because even though I was all creative, the stuff I was learning from engineering to production, then became the artistry craft, was still all behind the scenes. And ironically, Joey's correct. Like the problem in many places is that they could be teaching this, but once they start to teach it, it gives a lot of power to the creative person. And then you start to see the role of the conservative person kind of start to dwindle. I'm going to give a real life example of my situation. When I signed my first deal with Capitol Records, I did it was an extension of the partnership deal that I had with UBO. I knew nothing about how record labels operated in 2006 or 2007. I didn't know anything about how deals were cultivated. The only thing that I knew was that I didn't want to sign as an artist to anyone. I wanted to sign to my own entity first, because this is what I was told: sign to your own entity first, become your own business, and then that way you don't lose the creative control. Well, 2006, 2007, I signed the biggest deal of my life, and 2007, I lost creative control. And how I learned that I lost creative control was because I didn't have the financial control to begin with. And because another company was infusing money into my career, they got the final say of what they were going to pay for and what they weren't going to pay for. And I remember looking at my album cover of my first CD. Now, mind you, I grew up in Washington Heights. The street I grew up on, 164th Street between Broadway and Fort Washington. It wasn't the best area in the 80s. It wasn't probably the best area in the 90s. It's getting way better now in New York, obviously, based on a lot of different factors. But I didn't live in the projects, right? Like I lived in a 1 block away from Columbia Presbyterian Hospital. Not the greatest area, but I still didn't live in the projects. I was on the road when I got my first album cover, and I looked, and it was already printed. And I got to see it because I was working so hard, diligently moving around to every radio station, making sure the record went viral. And I saw my first album cover, and it was my face superimposed with a project building behind it. And I was infuriated because I'm like, doesn't represent me as a person. It doesn't represent me as an artist. Who made the call to make this happen? And I think at the time, it was the product manager who said that it made more sense to make me a little bit more gritty because I was a New York artist. And to be honest with you, I don't want to talk about the past as if I could have changed anything, but I feel like because it didn't represent me, it may not have reached the audience that I was gunning to reach at that time. And fast forward, when the money was distributed with the record labels, I think we generated about $16 million the first year. The first check I ever got was like 30 grand out of that 16 million that was accumulated. And I couldn't for the life of me understand why. And what I did as a creative, what most creatives wouldn't do, is I went into a litigation, and I did a forensic audit. And the only reason why I can even talk about these words now is because I paid probably $500,000 to go to litigation and forensic audit. So I had to pay for that education by learning it the hard way. And it says a lot about a lot of creative people out there. Most creative people don't want to be conservative. They don't want to dot the I's and cross the T's because it takes their mind away from the creative side. And I completely understand it. However, they should be teaching some of this stuff, at least a fraction of some of this stuff, before they go out and get these huge deals or signing into these big production companies. So that's what I do now. So now in life, I speak to people behind the scenes or even sometimes in front of the camera, and I basically make a plea to say, hey, you need to learn the business somehow, some way. Read a book, do something, go online, talk to ChatGPT or Perplexity or any one of these apps that you can have a fluid conversation with now and learn the business.
That's awesome. That's awesome. What's interesting about that is that I've been an entrepreneur my whole life. I grew up in manufacturing, had a tech company, did a bunch of M&A stuff. I've always been to use your words, I've been the creative conservative person, meaning that I'm creative enough. Actually, I think in my world, I'm very creative.
You're quite creative, Dan.
Yeah, I am. Within that business world, I'm very creative. I'm a philosophy guy and all this sort of thing. And what I found over my time is that the thing that I find to be most satisfying, like personally, is not necessarily being the operator of the business, not being the person necessarily in charge of it, but helping other people get to where they're going. And maybe that's an age thing as I've gotten older. But to your point, helping other people find their way and help them skip steps that maybe I kind of stumbled over along the way. That's what it's all about. And so it's cool that in your area of expertise as well, that you're doing something similar. That's cool.
Yeah, I gotta commend you for that, because a lot of people are afraid to probably even say something like that. Like, I wasn't the CEO of any company that I've launched, because I don't have it in me to read through documents all the time.
Yeah.
Yes, I can skim them. Yes, I can look for the big words, like how much I'm getting paid for something and what the commitment is. But realistically, like you have to have someone in place. I think in a perfect world, creative people and conservative people can coexist. I think the issue becomes when a conservative person starts to try to blend in the creative space, and then and they know that they're not a creative people, but they know that they have the check that they can wave around. So now you're dictating how creative people should operate based on it. And I think a perfect person who's building any company understands how to keep the right people around him to kind of balance that scale. So I commend you for that outlook.
Yeah. What's interesting about that is I think it comes down to the culture within an organization and like what they really hold as most valuable. Like, for example, in one of our businesses that we have a land development business, and we're shifting further into the process, meaning not just land development, but all the way through horizontal and vertical construction to build houses for families, right? And as we've been going through this process of kind of that business vertical, which, by the way, I'm not in charge of. I have people that run that, but I'm kind of like the vision side of it. And as the last couple of years, what I've realized is that in the land development side, or the land entitlement side, even before the development part, your customer are the big builders, right? The big D.R. Horton, KB Homes, all these
Mattamy
right?
Homes, yeah.
The biggest, right? Those are the customers. So we're a vendor to those customers at that stage of the process. And what I realized was, it reminds me of the old manufacturing days, because that's really what it is. It's a manufacturing process. You're a vendor to a very large company, and a very large company is all conservative people. Again, to use the language, it's all corporate conservative bureaucracy. Like, their main goal is just watching each of these numbers. The objective in building a home, in my opinion, really comes down to supplying somewhere that people want to live. And I think now, in today's world, even more important, that is the number one driver of wealth in America, is allowing people to purchase a home and finding some solution for them to getting a home, right? And so I don't believe, and this is probably a statement that many would agree with, I don't believe that that's the main thought process for the builders or for these these monster companies. Their main objective, as you're pointing out in kind of the music business, is all the dollars, which is great, because at scale you have to really watch out for the dollars 100%. But I think it comes down to melding that creative and that culture and that mission of what are you actually trying to accomplish, so that that one side doesn't overpower the other. It's my belief that in the building industry, for example, it's very much the main objective is just the dollars, and they've kind of lost sight. I believe they've legitimately lost sight, or never even really intended to have sight of what they're really doing, which is putting people in homes, giving Americans opportunity for wealth creation, because the purchase of a home is the main driver. All of that stuff. So that we just had a meeting about this yesterday, and one of the things that came up was like, okay, Dan, well, that's great. So let's strip like some of the altruistic stuff out of it. And I'm not an altruistic person by any means. I'm a practical person, but I also believe that part of being practical is making sure that the people that are around are set up in a position to succeed, right? So like, if I'm going to sell somebody a house, I want to make sure that I'm selling them the best product and also the product that's going to get them even in ways that they're not necessarily even thinking about. How is this thing going to maximize value for them? How do we as a team, the end user being the customer, the buyer, and us at the beginning of the process, work together to kind of achieve this common goal of get you a good house and get you some like wealth creation in the process. So anyway, I can go to the details of it in another conversation, but my point with it is you've got to meld the conservative dollars only mindset with the creative, altruistic, or all these other, for lack of a better word, soft things, which are really the things that make the world better. Frankly,
I mean, let's use housing as an example. And we talk about the different styles of housing. I'm going to say this: there's a concept that came across my table many years ago called work, live, play. Right. So that's basically the style of home that people want in today's space. They want to be able to work, live, and play where they live, where their homes are. So now you start to get into places where there's more open kitchen concepts, right? Because people want to be surrounded by their loved ones. And I think then now you got into the whole tiny home era, where people were buying tiny homes because they realized they didn't need these big properties. And I think that's when creative people get involved with helping conservatives understand how trends are moving. Because most conservatives, what a conservative person will do, and it's no disrespect to them, is they'll just pile problem on top of problem until the problem just is too much of a problem. And circa 2008, I'm talking subprime era, and then they just stack it on top until the system caves in, and then you got to have a creative person come back in and say, hey, well, can we look at things from a different perspective? Let's look at it from a work, live, play perspective, to where people are, I use an example. I bought a home from Mattamy Homes. You can blank that out if you want. I don't want to give them praise. I just literally bought a home to buy it. But they have another community close to mine, and this community is basically, I don't know what they call it, but they created this farm where they have you can live there, but you can plant trees and plants and herbs and whatever. And I bought my home, and I'm like, wait, why didn't I see this community before I bought my home? And I felt like I shot myself in the foot, because I'm like, yo, this is what people are starting to kind of turn to. Like, they want where they live to become a lifestyle, not just a place to live, but also just a lifestyle to live as well. So yeah, housing, music, food and beverage, every industry that's been disrupted in the past 10 years, based on someone who leans creative and conservative, have been disrupted by technology in some way, shape, or form. Food and beverage, it was Uber Eats, transportation, well, still Uber, I guess. Homes, everything. So yeah,
totally.
Shawn, let's go a little different direction here. I want to know, have you ever dealt with imposter? You seemed like such a confident, like a lovely, comfortably confident person. Have you ever dealt with imposter syndrome? Have there ever been moments where you thought, I don't know what I'm doing. I can't do this. Why do people think I can do this? And how have you overcome it?
Early in my career, I want to say when I was around 17, 18 years old, I was heavily influenced by Jay-Z as a musician. And I remember every record that I would write, it was like in the eyes of him, and it wasn't in the eyes of me. And I thought that was going to be something super cool to introduce to the world. And I remember having a conversation with some people behind the scenes, and at one point even like maybe entertaining the idea of like finding getting a record deal based off of those similarities. And I remember saying to myself, man, I don't like, this is cool and all, but it's not who I am. So like, I kind of have to figure out what makes me me. And you can be so heavily influenced by someone, not even knowing, to be honest, because there were other artists that influenced me, but just the mannerisms, the cadence, things like that I was influenced by. And I think early, like maybe 2000, when I was 18 years old, the year, I don't even know what year it was, but let's just say 2000, somewhere around that world, 18 years old, I decided to start doing music that was more like of who I was as a person. And I started to realize that people gravitated to it a little bit more. So yes, I have had imposter syndrome musically, but I think now in life, especially when we talk about like social media and how a person can actually get beat up in social media verbally, like every day you could wake up, and I'm sure you understand as an actor, like you're literally exposing your life, not just for your craft, but also you have to let people in on like what you eat and who you are. And I use an example. I did a performance a couple of weeks ago for the Big 3 game that Ice Cube works with, and I remember I wore an outfit. It was all black, and then I had white sneakers on, and I had black socks on, and I had a viral moment on because I'm not much of a social media person, but I had a viral moment on someone else's page where people were making fun of the fact that I was wearing black socks with white shoes. Now, listen, I get it.
I wear black socks with white shoes every single day, so we're together. Like I could show you.
And you know, and listen, I listen, I get it if you're into fashion. I have never claimed to be a fashionista, but it does not. I'm gonna go in my closet now, and whatever pair of socks I see in my sock basket is what I grab. I don't think about what color it is, and it's something that doesn't bother me. So when I saw thousands of people commenting on my socks, I laugh about it and I say, wow, like this is where the world has come. And it's a funny moment for me, but for most people that would probably be one of those moments where they kind of go into a shell and disappear. And me, I've been in so many scenarios like that I just embrace it and I laugh now. And I think because of that, I don't know if I could ever get hit with imposter syndrome. I'm not saying it's impossible, but the skin that I've developed because of social media has just been so thick that you could pretty much say anything about me on social media and I'm probably not going to be affected by it.
Yeah.
Cool. You know, something I'm gleaning from this conversation is what you're saying, Shawn, and what I've been learning the last several years as well is you got to be genuine. You got to be yourself, be authentic. That's where your success lies as a creative. However, using your terminology, the conservatives, the people, the gatekeepers, the people who are running the show are always saying, in my opinion, they're always saying, well, this is what works. We need to fit you into the box that we already have because we know this works. We know this will bring in the money. What advice do you give to the creatives out there who are working in an environment telling you, no, be yourself, just make sure it's in this lane?
As a person who is creative and conservative, the conservative in me is going to agree. But as a creative person, I would tell them to go kick rocks with no shoes on. So here's what I realized. You can play it safe and have a hell of a career playing it safe, but you will never be disruptive. You will never be an icon. You will never be a breakaway person. There's no way you can do it if you're following protocol and doing exactly in this. I'm not going to say it in a bad way because I love sponsorships, but like I look at I'm a tech geek, right? Like when I approach people, I tell them, hey, I'm a nerd. Like I'm a nerd at heart. Maybe I grew up on the streets and maybe I can survive the streets, but in reality, I'm not a gangster. I'm not a killer. I'm a person that reads Engadget and CNET. When I go to sleep, I'm on YouTube looking at reviews on technology. Like you can't look at Apple as a company. Apple has given us so many amazing products over the years, but they're starting to flatline because people are realizing that they've become the conservative company, which is great. My whole ecosystem in here is Apple. But the other day I purchased Android, right? I've always had one to have, and you start to get into it, and you open it up, and it's obviously like a foldable phone, and I'm like, well, why hasn't Apple created this? And I start to ask myself, like, is it because I know people would buy it if Apple did it, so are they just waiting to perfect it, which makes sense? Okay, cool, great, but how many people are starting to leave because they're starting to see that you're no longer being creative? And it's not a jab at Apple. It happened to BlackBerry. It happened to Blockbuster. It happened to so many companies that tried to stay conservative and realized they got swallowed by someone that was creative and more disruptive.
Yep, that's the life cycle of business, basically. I mean, Nokia and the iPhone, right, is a perfect example of that. I was at a talk once where I can't remember what the guy's title was, but it's like super high up guy at Nokia was speaking. And he was talking to everyone, and he was telling the story of Nokia's like rise and fall. And one of the questions that came up in the conversation was how did you guys not see it coming? You saw, like, Apple was talking about what they were doing with the iPhone years in advance of before it really came out within the industry. I mean, it wasn't public, but within the industry. And his exact words were like, we all saw it coming. We all knew it was going to put us like under, like we were kind of hoping it wouldn't, but the ship was too big to turn at that point. To your point about the conservatives, it was too big and too conservative and too bureaucratic, because that's what happens when things get too big. And they were like, we couldn't shift. We made phones. The iPhone was a computer. So we would have to redo our entire business to somehow compete with them. And it was just literally impossible. And then Nokia was no more after the iPhone came out. That's what happens. That's literally what happens. So to your point, you need that creative, disruptive thing. If you're going to be in a big company, the big company needs to somehow culturally, which I know they're all Amazon. I mean, Jeff Bezos said it himself, Amazon will be out of business in the next 30 years unless they can continue this pace of innovation, essentially. And so if they don't, then they'll be done just like Nokia and everything like that. So, but which is all of our opportunities as creative people to launch the next thing that becomes Amazon. Like, that's the system. That's how it works. Like, it's very interesting.
I used to be so I got heavily involved in the cryptocurrency space, and I want to say like circa 2017. It was for two reasons, right? One, it was we were used to doing traditional VC raise. We had raised some money from VCs, but a friend of mine in Dubai had introduced me to the fact of doing this quote unquote called ICO, right? And it was called an initial coin offering, and it was basically similar to doing an IPO. However, you weren't using fiat funds. And obviously crypto has proven to be this kind of really weary space. I don't necessarily advocate for people to invest in crypto because it's so volatile. So that's not really something that I do. However, I've invested in the market myself. And so because I was an early investor in some of the tokens and I made a great return on them, I got to meet a lot of the people who were coming up in the space building these crypto verticals per se. And I would sit with them because all of them, they wanted to utilize entertainers to kind of help them propel their whatever they were launching. And they would come to me for advice on that. And I would always say to them, hey, if you want to penetrate any industry, you need to bring a person in or people in that understand that industry. I get it. It's customary that you could wave a flag around and spend a lot of money on certain things. And I'll use a real life example. There was a company called Sandbox who did a deal with Snoop Dogg for a certain amount of money. And it was a great deal for them when it came to increasing their market cap. However, it wasn't a deal that made sense for them based on their demographic that they were targeting, because Snoop Dogg is the biggest artist in the world and we can't take that away from him. But if you're talking about Web3 or whatever this is, you're not talking about 50, 40, 60-year-old people. You're talking about teenagers, 18-year-olds, 20-year-olds. I said, you guys could take the same money you're using and sprinkle it around to certain individuals that have more influence in the space. And they laughed at me. I'm not going to lie. They actually laughed. They didn't take my advice. And, I'm not saying they're not doing well, but it hasn't exceeded the expectations of the initial investors. And the same can be said about a lot of companies in many different spaces, because they don't realize that, yes, I get it. Jay-Z is the top of the game. Beyonce is amazing. She has influence, but so does, artist X that's coming out of Washington Heights that doesn't maybe have a billion followers, but they have a lot of influence in that market and can help you penetrate the minds of the people you're trying to reach. So yeah.
Yep. Cool. Awesome. Well, what else? What other questions do we have for Shawn while he's here? Otherwise, or Shawn, that you have for us, or otherwise, we'll probably wrap it up.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'd love to do this in person. I know you guys are starting this podcast, this Loose Conversation podcast, and I think it's an amazing thing. I'm so tired of the podcasts that have the same, twist to them. And I tell people all the time, I don't want to gossip. I don't.
No.
So I think I appreciate what you guys are doing, and you have a fan and also a supporter for what you guys are doing, for sure.
Yeah, and we'll get together in real life too. And I think there's all kinds of opportunities for us to work together, and whatever we've got cooking, I'm sure that when you put the right people in a room, good stuff happens. So
agreed. I've got to put an audition on tape for Law and Order SVU later today, and I'm going to be listening to This Is Why I'm Hot while I get everything set up. So I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And when I book it, I'll give you 10%.
Oh, don't do that. This is on record, so don't do that. But no, I wouldn't take anything. I would just love to watch it once it happens. And I will say this, Dan, you've had an invisible person standing behind you the whole time. So what is that back there? Why is that? I see some glasses there.
So they're flat on the wall. So just as a little side story, so as you'll see through some of our marketing and branding stuff, and it came out of the last 13 years of living in Florida, I have purple sunglasses that I wear, and I wear them everywhere. So I kind of got to be known for these purple sunglasses. And to my point about from an earlier part of this conversation, one of the companies that I advised and who's done really well, and we recently just made a deal with private equity for them and sold, a chunk of the company, and now they're scaling with them. For my birthday a couple of years ago, they cut these out and custom made those for me. Though they stick on the, it's metal, but they're hanging on the wall, and they just look. They look totally 3D. They couldn't have designed it better. So
hey, listen, as long as you didn't. Oh, go ahead, Joey.
I'm just wondering, have you ever misplaced your purple glasses? They're your trademark.
Well, lots of times, but the thing is, they're only $10, and I have a whole inventory of them in my closet over here. So I lose them all the time.
I was just gonna say, if you invented invisibility, man, I'm coming to your house.
Awesome.
So I have a silly question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Since you got destroyed on your black socks with white sneakers, and I know you said you didn't care, but you going to continue to wear black socks with white sneakers?
I will continue to wear them. Now, I will say this: I did tuck them in a little bit more. Visible,
I'm just curious because my whole thing is people are so mean on social media, and I'm always like, would you ever say that to somebody's face? I mean, like a friend might say that to you joking, like, Mims, what are you doing with the black socks with the white shoes? But would strangers come up to you and say that?
You know what? Thank God I have my friends and I still joke around till this day. We joke on each other. So nothing is off limits, and I think that you grow tough skin when you sit around people who are just not afraid to joke with you. Which I think there was a study that said that's like a great indication of friendship. So yes, will I wear black socks again? 100%, because I think probably 90% of my socks are black. I think I might have like some red and blue socks in the collection, but no, I'm gonna wear white socks, blacks. I'm gonna wear black socks and white shoes. Probably do it on purpose now, just to irritate.
Yeah, that's how the purple sunglasses started. People were kind of joking about it with me when I bought them the first time, and so I'm like, well, I'll just do it forever now. That's just what's gonna happen.
Man, now I need a thing. All right.
Yeah.
You're inspiring
Joey,
me. I need a thing. Okay.
A hat, some sort of big hat. I don't know.
We're gonna find Joey. We're gonna find your thing for sure.
I'd love it.
Awesome.
So I have one final question. What's your next creative venture? Creative and conservative gentlemen.
Listen, you know what? One thing I want to look into gaming. I think gaming is a really great space. I know a friend of mine was trying to get me to open up a gaming space here in the town I live in to teach kids how to not only game but also teaching the coding aspect of it. And we're talking like Fortnite, Roblox, things that they already play, and it's having people come in and learn how to monetize off these games. I think that that's an important skill set, and it also gives parents something to do with their kids after school that they may not. I mean, it's not going to baseball practice, but let's be honest, not everybody's going to be an athlete. So like sometimes you want to exercise that side of someone's mental. And I think the other thing for me is podcasting. And I know Lennox might have mentioned it to you guys. I'm a firm believer that there's like a gap where you have your I guess we call it amateur podcasting, and then you have your announcers or like broadcasters, and there's no like middle ground for it.
Yeah.
I think people are like wanting something in that space. So those are the two spaces I've been looking at.
Yeah. Cool.
Excellent.
Well, thank you so much for being on with us today. This is a great conversation. So
What a pleasure to meet you. Thank you.
Oh, pleasure's all mine, Joey. Good luck with the audition.
Thank you.
Break a leg, knock him dead. I know you got it.
Thank you.
awesome. Cool. Still see you later.
Thank you guys.
Thank you, Shawn.
Bye-bye.
All right.